Okay. I'm gonna keep reading The Devil in Massachusetts by Marion L. Starkey. I read chapter 6. I thought I was recording, but I wasn't. I don't feel like going back. So basically, they condemned another person to be a witch. I'm just gonna try and kind of summarize it real quick. Once again, it was uh, the little girls, uh, and all they had to do was like imitate. Who was it? They accused uh, the old lady Rebecca of being a witch, and all they had to do was just like mimic their movement, and uh, while the while they were on trial, and it was considered to be proof of witchcraft. So they sent an old elderly woman uh, who spent most of her life giving to the community to prison. So they sent her to prison after all she did because they accused her of being a witch because the little girls uh, basically just mimicked her movements, and they said, yeah, she's putting children under a spell, witchcraft. But then someone else came in at the very end. His name was John Proctor, and he basically called bullshit on the girls, and he said that the girls themselves should be hanged uh, because they are killing innocent people. So that's like I don't know, it's kind of barbaric to do to children, but at the same time, it's like he just came in and saw everything, and I don't know. It feels weird saying that someone who said that they should kill children is now considered, I guess, level headed in this case anyway. Um, because he saw what they were doing, he was not happy with it, and he spoke out about it. Um, okay, so chapter 7. John Proctor's Jade. Oh yeah, the what's her name? The woman, the old lady that they sent to prison. Her name was Rebecca Nurse. Um, so uh, John Proctor's Jade, chapter 7. Rebecca Nurse was the eldest of three sisters who were still sometimes referred to as aggregate the aggregate as the towny girls. The other two sisters, considerably Rebecca's junior, were both matrons and vigorous vigorous character. Mary, wife of Isaac, St. lived in Topsfield, and Sarah, wife of Peter Cloyce, was a villager and attended the village church. The church had, however, seen little of Sarah or any of Rebecca's other kinsmen since her arrest. The attitude of both Paris and Noyes had uh, alienated the family of the accursed. Both pastors had an interest in the case. Noyes because she was normally, no wait, nominally still a member of the congregation. Paris because since Rebecca's removal from Salem town, she had found it more convenient to attend meeting at the village church. Rebecca's family had been shunned by failure of either pastor to show any charity to the old woman in her hour of need. They had been less merciful to Harthron, least who at least had his moment of pity and doubt. Uh, then there was no doubt in these men, much less pity. At the word of the girls, they had dismissed Rebecca's whole life of faith and good works as irrelevant at best, and at worst mere hypocrisy. For them, no examination or trial was needed to prove her guilt. Paris believed that with his own eyes he had seen her torture his niece uh, for refusing to contract with the devil. After catching the woman red-headed, how could he deal with her but severely? Sorry. After catching the woman red-handed, how could he deal with her but severely? There would be a time for pity and comfort when Rebecca had cleansed her soul by confessing her crime. Paris and Noyes visit her in prison and prayed for her, but always to one end, that she acknowledge her witchcraft. So no matter what these people did once they were convicted, it was just say you're a witch and then you're dead anyway. Um, to Rebecca's family, was not given the grace of to understand this solicitude. To them, the minister's attitude was brutal. Never again would they willingly listen to such men. They would, for thanks to Rebecca's rearing, they were devout and now craved more than ever the comfort of the word of the Lord, journey miles afield rather than sit under the pulpit which contained Paris. Yet, 3 April was a sacrament Sunday. Uh, Beverly and Topsfield were hard to get to. Sarah Cloyce, deeply afflicted in her sister's affliction, hungering and thirsting after righteousness, let her neighbors persuade her to come to receive the sacrament in the village church. The congregation assembled quietly that day. The Lord had laid his hand on the demons of the girls, and they were still. There might indeed have been no disorder at all had not Goody Cloyce created it. But when Paris named his text, Sarah did what was unthinkable. She got up, stalked down the aisles, and went out, slamming the door behind her. Have I not chosen you 12, and one of you is a devil? Paris had read. In the quiet meeting house, the words rang out with a terrible clarity, but Sarah's exit and the manner of her going gave even more ominous significance to his next words. His proposition, which he read as soon as the uh, rever- reverberations of the crashing of the door had reverberations of the crashing of the door had died down. Christ knows how many devils there are in his church and who they are. After the service, few could speak of anything but Sarah's behavior and what it pro- pretended. Her friends defended her. She had become suddenly ill. She had not slammed the door purposely. The high wind had winched it from her hand, but others regarded such explanations as mere naivete. There was a darker meaning which could be revealed in God's good time. It was revealed very promptly they had done before they had done talking about it. The girls had fallen into their fits again and now pointed out a horrid sight invisible to all others. A company of witches gathered nearby to receive the unholy sacrament of red bread and bloody wine. Oh, goody, uh, oh, goody Cloyce, I did not think to see you here, cried one. Is this a time to receive the sacrament? You ran away on the Lord's day and scorned to receive it in the meeting house. Is this a time to receive it? It was enough. A complaint against Sarah was sworn out on Monday, a warrant on Friday, and the following Monday, 11 April, Sarah herself was facing the magistrates. She faced them at first before her energy ran out with such spirit that there were moments when it was she rather than the magistrates who conducted the examination. "When did I hurt thee?" she commanded of John Indian. "A great many times." "Oh, you are a great, or, sorry. Oh, you are a grievous liar," cried Sarah. But to make such a reply is only to drive a nail in one's coffin. John Indian at once fell to the floor and trembled about there, bellowing with pain. It was obvious to the dullest that the devil of Sarah's own spite was at work on him. Previously, Sarah asked for water and sat down. Her move was a ruse and promptly exposed as such. She had merely gained time to listen to something the black man was whispering in her ear. The girls saw him bend over her and also saw Sarah's familiar, a yellow bird, fluttering about her head. There could be no defense in the light of such evidence. Sarah was held for trial and sent to join her sister Rebecca in Salem prison. It's no wonder that they are witches. Their mother was a witch before them, remarked young John Putman of this reunion. He was paid for the remark. The shapes of Rebecca and Sarah issued one midnight soon after from prison, fell upon his 8 weeks child and tortured it enough to pierce a stony heart until it died. Oh my goodness. Sarah Cloyce was not alone at the bar on 11 April, nor was the place Salem Village. The hearing had been transferred to the larger meeting house in Salem town to suit the convenience of several very important persons who had come, mostly from Boston, to study the situation at first hand. These included Deputy Governor Thomas Danforth, Samuel Sewall, his brother Stephen, and 3 other members of the General Council. Their presence here was proof that authorities in Massachusetts were by no means disposed to look on the outbreak as a parochial affair and purely the business of Salem Village. It was local only as the first appearance of the malignant contagion is local until it spreads and becomes epidemic. That this plague was spreading was already disturbingly obvious. Respectable church members had been caught in the act of witchcraft. A wizard was known to be practicing in Boston. The existence of all of the tall men of Boston had now been corroborated by other evidence in Titubas, and by other evidence than Titubas. The witches' Sabbath, where Sarah Cloyce had been unmasked, one of the girls had caught sight of a fine grave man. Though who he was, she couldn't say. The failure to identify this malefactor was one of the magistrate's most nagging problems. Such villagers as may have hoped that the visitors had come in a spirit of spectacle inquiry were doomed to disappointment. If anything, the distinguished members of the council watched the girls less critically than did the villagers, who had the advantage of acquaintance with these girls before they became so famous. Certainly, Samuel Sewall did not want either of the critical intelligence or of the generous measure of warm humanity the diary in which he was keeping his account with God. Sorry, the diary in which he was keeping his account with God, and which one in which would one day uh, be to theocratic Boston. What that his contemporary Samuel Pepys or Pepys, I guess, would be to Restoration London was characterized by a gift of shrewd observation. But one day his shrewdness was directed to one and to catching the witches at their crimes, and his sympathy was all for the girls, those innocent whom the forces of hell were so cruelly abusing. Neither he nor his associates had any invocations to suggest in the procedure initiated by Hawthorne and uh, Corwin, who, of course, were also present. How else could you conduct a witch hunt but in this way? The examination opened, to be sure, more tamely than most. The girls, the girls, apparently awed by their new surroundings and the extreme dignity of the assembly, contained themselves wearily at first. In fact, they left the initiative in the examinations of both Sarah Cloyce and the next witch to John Indian. But once it was borne in on them that the uh, dignitaries responded exactly as did the farm folk, they knew they were off and into such a uh, hold on, hula boot hula balu that Paris got hopelessly behind in his note taking. Only Mary Walcott Walcott was calm. She had brought her knitting with her and became so intent on it that she clicked her needles no matter what devils rioted about her. Every so often she glanced up to confirm someone else's story. She corroborated Abigail's announcement that two witches were sitting in the laps of unnamed magistrates, and John Indian's warning to a dog under the table that the wizard proctor had astride him. For by now the law had caught up to John Proctor. Initially, it had caught up with his wife only. The first crying out had occurred on Monday, 28 March, a few days after Rebecca Nurse's examination and John Proctor's outburst against the girls. Uh, there's there's Goody Proctor. One of the latter had cried in Ingersoll's ordinary. "Oh, witch, I'll have her hanged." For all for all John Proctor's recent reckless talk about the girls, he and his family held a high place in the esteem of the community. According to the several witnesses to the crying out, responded with unwanted uh, skepticism. They looked about them, remarked that there was nothing to see, and told the girls who had spoken that they believed she was lying. Had the girl run had the girl run true to form, she would have retracted to this reproof by going into convulsions. Instead, she sheepishly came out of her trance. "It was for sport," she admitted. I must have come. I must have some sport. Later, when Elizabeth Proctor was taken away, Goody Ingersoll, Daniel Eliot, and William Raymond put the episode on record to present as testimony for the defense. They might have spared themselves the pains the magistrate committed to spectral evidence would weave it as irrelevant and even frivolous any testimony based on the fact that other people could not see what the girls saw. One might as well in modern court testify that water is free from uh, bacilli on the grounds that it looks clear to the eye. The girls were the microscopes which God Himself had provided for the laboratory to work to detect the laboratory work of detecting witches. My goodness. But though the magistrates would not honor the testimony, the fact that it had been offered did seem to have a chastising effect on the girls. When Elizabeth Proctor took the stand, they eyed her in silence, but for John Indian, Elizabeth might have left the place without a court against her. There is the woman who came in her shift and choked me, he yelled suddenly. The ice was broken. The girls began to mutter and moan and to go into preliminary stages of their mediumistic trance, and then to produce the din of seawall called awful. Elizabeth was cited on what was now the classic perch for a witch, the beam, and a half dozen said that she had been after them to sign the book. Did you not tell me that your maid had written? Cried little Abigail. The maid was Mary Warren, who significantly was not present. Dear child, is it not so? Said Elizabeth. There is another judgment, dear child. It was as if the mother and stepmother of John Proctor's brood thought she could reason with one's young and tender, but there had never been anything tender about Abigail. Today her demon was rampant, even after court itself set her in a poltergeist frenzy in pursuit of her uncle, still laboring at his notes over the long table, until finally the poor man could not record that the demons loosed upon the girls were beyond control, and fold up his report unfinished. Thanks to the diabolic meddlesomeness, the contribution of John Proctor to the situation is obscure. He had come unsummoned to stand by his wife. At one point, while he was raising his stentorian voice in order to make himself heard above the tumult, young Abigail turned to him with an air of pleased discovery. Why can he pinch as well as she? Exclaimed Abigail. And she unfortunately was heard. Proctor had never been given to holding his tongue in crisis. Certainly his voice boomed out again and again during the scene that followed, but either Paris could not hear him through the uproar, or he considered everything he heard irrelevant. The magistrates, intent upon the reactions of the girls as their true source of information, turned to him only in reproof. You see, the devil will deceive you, one of them said. The children could see what you was going to do before the woman was hurt. I would advise you to repentance, for the devil is bringing you out. Proctor was learning that he had spoken more truly than he knew when he said that the girls, if left alone, would make devils of all of us. He must have accompanied his accused wife to Salem, confident that now that some of the soberest minds of the colony, notably Danforth and Sewall, were investigating the witchcraft, common sense would prevail. Instead, he now saw something like witchcraft of the most unexpected and disturbing nature. The common sense of these men had uh, abdicated before the crazed frenzies of wenches in their teens. Uh, had these men no eyes to see? Had they no daughters or sisters that they could not know how silly a female can be in the silly seasons of her teens? To what lengths she can go in her craving for attention? Proctor knew how to handle the witches. Look at Mary Warren, who knew better than to come to court today. Just give him a chance to demonstrate his therapy to the rest. But Proctor's reasoning was like blasphemy to the magistrates. With them, the devil was indeed taken over. This was his hour and the power of darkness. He came in from he he came in the form of a stern, mad logic, a closed circle which admitted no intrusion from the world of objectively observed reality, or rather, it was a logic which admitted of only one reality: the affliction of these girls and their testimony as as to its cause. The girls had pointed out Proctor as most dreadful wizard. He must put away the what he must be put away with the rest, and so he was. Later in the day, 6 accused were ridden away to Boston to await trial in prison. There, Sarah Cloyce and her sister Rebecca, the Proctors, man and wife, Martha Coy, and puzzled little Dorcas Good. Their state, however, was not so miserable as that of the three who had gone before them. They were good friends and good neighbors, with the exception of the little girl, were people of mature experience and character. They could discuss their common plight together, reason it out, and make plans for bringing Massachusetts officialdom back to its senses. God would be with them, for they were innocent, and none doubted it. None doubted it about the other. Dorcas, clinging to the constable, about her looked about her in a kind of sober uh, eagerness as they skirted the board. Lynn marches to Noddle's Island and then crossed the harbor by ferry to Boston town. No one else in the village, no one she knew, had ever had the advantage of a trip so far from home, but the journey's end was a shock. Of all the fine buildings in Boston, brick and fame, the constable peeked out of the meanest to stop it. It smelled ill, and in it waited Dorcas's mother in a foul humor. For Mary Warren's absence from court, there had been sound reason. John Proctor had, after all, made one convert to the case of common sense, and it was the girl he called his jade. Proctor, a titan of a man, as commanding of figure as he was downright in manner, had long ago won the respect, if not the love, of his maidservants. Her affection, to be sure, did not extend to his present wife. Mary felt that Elizabeth did not understand her husband, and she was making his life miserable, an observation for which there may have been some grounds in that Elizabeth was currently suffering from the first stages of pregnancy. Yet Mary was in the present crisis too loyal to her master to testify against his wife. Besides, good sense may impress the hypnoid subject as well as fantasy. Living at close quarters with Proctor's sanity, Mary had well before the examination began to emerge from her dream. Older than the other girls, serious in her pities, she now looked about her and saw that she had fallen into strange company. The taking of Proctor with Elizabeth gave Mary a kind of shock treatment, which completely restored her sanity. Uh, she might, in her secret heart, rejoice to see the wife put away, but the husband never. Besides, Mary, left at home with Proctor's 5 children, was in a difficult position. The 3 older children were old enough to speak to her in plain terms for her part in bringing about such misfortune, and their comments were reinforced by the opinion of the neighborhood at large. Proctor had been a good neighbor. Few who knew him, either here or in his native Ipswich, would believe ill of him. Other people might be witches, but not the man of common sense, John Proctor. If this were not enough, Mary may have had another, an extreme object lesson in the misery fantasy may bring into the world. Under the law, witches were to be treated like enemy aliens found guilty of conspiring against the government under which they lived. Not only their lives, but their goods were forfeit. Wow. Neither to be sure, neither to be sure could be taken before trial and conviction. But the proctor's case, a zealous sheriff overlooked his technicality. Well, before the trial, he came to their house and seized all the goods, provisions, and cattle that he could at, and sold some of the cattle at half price, and killed others and put them up for the West Indies. Throughout the beer out of the barrel, and carried away the barrel, emptied a pot of broth, and took away the pot, and left nothing for the support of the children. The youngest of these were 3 and 7 respectively, so suggestible a nature as Mary Warren cannot look on such events unmoved. Looking at the other girls with whom she had spent so many tranced hours, she now saw them as a pack of undisciplined children who had somehow uh, beguiled an entire community into playing a wicked game with them, such as a game as a 5-year-old might invent. It was for sport. One of them had admitted. It, and uh, apropos of the proctors, well, here was the sport. Here was their sport. An ordinary household suddenly deprived of its mainstays, and little children weeping. If this was sport, Abigail Williamson and Anne Putman could have it. Mary Warren was through. Mary was not, however, of such stuff as heroines are made of. She did not at this point seek out Mr. Hawthorne or the Reverend Samuel Parris to make a formal announcement of her change of heart. She might, in the end, as well have done so. She could not keep her views to herself, and what she confided to her friends presently reached the ears of the afflicted girls, and immediately after the magistrates. The girls, Mary was saying, did but disassemble the magistrates, might as well examine the keeper's daughter. that had been afflicted many years, and take notice of what she said as any of the afflicted persons. She added details, she said, as any of the afflicted. She added details from personal experience in her affliction. She was reported as saying she had seen the apparitions of 100 persons, for she said her head was distempered, that she could not tell what she said, and when she was well again, she could not say that she saw any of the apparitions at the time aforesaid. That Mary's heresy had been suspected so early as the time of the proctor's examination was indicated by Abigail Williams' question about the maids having signed the book. Not long after, Mary's whispering campaign against her former colleagues became so afflicting as to send some of them into possession. In this state, their eyes were open to the truth. Satan, alarmed at the efficiency with which the girls were exposing his secret agents, was now penetrating the accusing circle itself. Through the medium of the proctors, he had got Mary to put her hand on the book. She so lately one of the tormented, had now become a tormentor. In such an emergency, there was only one thing to do. A warrant was issued for the arrest of the renegade. So it happened that on 19 April, Mary was given the opportunity that she had not had the courage to seek directly. She was taken before the magistrates and asked to examine herself. And asked to explain herself. The courtroom to which Mary Warren was led should have been familiar enough. The magistrates had returned to Salem village. From the stand, Mary could overtake her own bench, where she worshipped of a Sunday, and into the faces of the people she had known all her life. And yet there was a difference. The people were eyeing her strangely, not at all in a pitying awe with which most of them had looked at her when she was fighting off imaginary devils and telling what she now knew to be untruths. She looked in vain for a sign of sympathy and encouragement. There was none. Mary, all alone, turned and tremendously faced the magistrates. Hawthorne bent forward. His voice was kind, for this was not the common round of witches, but a girl already tormented beyond endurance, and more to be pitied for frailly than condemned for deliberate wrongdoing. You were a little while ago an afflicted person. Now you are an afflictor, he said. How comes this to pass? Mary found her mouth gone almost too dry for speech. It had formerly been so easy to speak in this meeting house. She had been buoyed up on a warm current of solicitude and belief. Now it was as if these familiar people before her had been turned to stone. Stonily they awaited her reply, and in her eyes she read their disbelief of what she had said and must say. Yet the magistrate seemed kind, and desperately she turned to his kindness. I looked up to God, she quivered. I looked up to God, she quivered, and I take it to be a mercy of God. What? Rapped out Hawthorne incredulously. Do you take it as a mercy to afflict others? In the front benches just now, Mary sat the girls. Initially, she had not been afraid of them. She knew them all in all their tricks, but now these began to cry out and gasp and writhe, and when they did so, there was something new. Uh, Hitherto, when hitherto, when that had happened, Mary had been part of it. Her body had withered, and with theirs, her voice had been a part of the follow of the howling and yowling. It had been a kind of warm communion, tormenting and yet inexplicably satisfying. But now that she was a part of it, it was all different and yet terribly the same. In spite of herself, the suggestible Mary began to quiver too. She could not control herself. She felt her fits returning, but even as she sank to the floor, her voice rang out in a despairing cry. I will speak! Oh, I am sorry for it. I am sorry for it. Oh, Lord, help me. Oh, good Lord, save me. I will tell. What she would tell and what she was sorry for, no one could make out. She became speechless, her jaws locked. For a while she struggled to stand and then fell into a fit so sore that she had to be carried outside. It was not Mary, but one of the girls who interrupted the situation to the spectators. Mary, she explained, had started to confess, but the shapes of Martha Coy and Elizabeth Proctor had fallen on her in fury and choked her off. Nothing could be done with the girl at the time. The magistrates let her rest across the road in the ordinary while they examined two other witches and one wizard who had also been brought to court on 19 April. When they had disposed of these cases, they took Mary aside for a private interview. This was an unusual concession, but then Mary was unusual and, above all, a pitiful witch. In her present struggle, they saw a symbol of Christ fighting off the devil in the wilderness. In that private interview, Mary became briefly coherent. I will speak, Satan. She saith she will kill me. Oh, she saith she owes me a spite, and will claw me off. Avoid, Satan, for the name of God, avoid. Even the outcry of the informative on the basis of the spectral insight of the other girls, the magistrates gathered. That she was Elizabeth Proctor, though Mary herself did not blame her. But Mary herself did not name her. There was nothing to do with the girl but confine her in Salem prison with the other two who had been heard that day. There Mary reclaimed several weeks. Her prison record was curious. There Mary remained several weeks. Her prison record was curious. When she was let alone for a space, she was as rational as anyone, and in discussion with her fellow prisoners, reasserted her skepticism in the value of fits. Anyone fits as a means of getting at the truth. Had John Proctor been there, Mary might have been able to keep it up even when the magistrates came to interview her, as they frequently did. But Proctor was far away in Boston, and by herself an emotional servant girl was no match for magistrates and ministers trained in the rigid discipline of theocratic logic. Even Joan of Arc broke at times under the stress of the Inquisition, and poor Mary was no Joanne. However, interview started, she always ended up confessing to whatever the magistrates desired to hear at the time, and the end of her confess. Sorry, in the end, she confessed to much that it would have been better if Mary had never ventured into her brief heresy and so drawn to herself such intensive inquiry. Even so, the reports as the magistrates kept of their private conferences with the girl between 21 April and 12 May show a pattern of stubborn, recurrent sanity on the part of Mary. An attempt to tell the real story, though she was early induced to admit that Proctor had brought her the book, she denied that he had tried to force her to sign it by threatening to run hot thongs down her throat. No, said Mary, and probably truthfully, that threat had been made only to bring her out of a fit. She cited a conversation that had the ring of truth. If you are afflicted, I wish you more afflicted, and you and all, Proctor had said. Master, what makes you say that? Because you go to bring out innocent persons. I told I told him that could not be, reported Mary in the magistrate's spelling. She added lamely, whether the devil took advantage of that to afflict them, I know not. Even then, Mary stubbornly refused to make a direct accusation of her master, though she succumbed early to the temptation to make a witch of her mistress. She reported suspicious objects that she had seen in Elizabeth's house, a mysterious on onitment, a puppet stuck with pens, books that she could make nothing of. Once Mary had opened one and spelled out the word Moses, but the phrase that followed she could not make it out and regarded darkly. The shape of Elizabeth paid her off for these revelations. One day, in the presence of the justice, the girl fought off her apparitions. I will tell, she cried. The wicked creature, it's you that stopped my mouth. Oh, Betty Proctor, it is she. It is she I live with lust. It shall be known, the witch, hast thou undone me body and soul? Other fantasies steamed from her once she started. In her visions, she accounted for the supernatural causes of the death of a man from the vessel in Salem Harbor, the, the felling of a man from a cherry tree, and the casting away of a ket of a catch. At last, on 12 May, she gave up trying to defend Proctor from the charge of wizardry. There was something blissful about her surrender. Dreamily, she reported that she had felt a shape hovering above her. She had reached up and pulled it down, and lo, there was John Proctor in her lap. Softly, after this catharsis, the magistrates pronounced Mary cleansed of her sin and allowed her to rejoin the girls in their place of honor in the courtroom. Mary never again played lead in their demonstrations, but neither did she again lapse into the dangerous, unbelievable word of reality. Mary got no honor from her abortive act of courage, not even from fellow heretics who agreed with her that the girls did not dissemble. Some of these, seeing her return to the circle and go on as before, were to say that the whole incident was a plot designed to make the proceedings more credible. Yet surely as no one was plotting, least of all the hapless Mary, the community at large had become bewitched. Magistrates, no less than the girls, bewitched by a kind of mad hypnosis, expressed in panic on the one hand and crusading a fever on the other. At such moments, the voice of reason always sounds like blasphemy, and dissenters are of the devil. The wonder was not that Mary definition was denounced, but that it should have been treated with mercy. About a month later, there was a parallel through less conspicuous definitions. Sarah Churchill, the other 20-year-old, fell prey to compunction after her explosive master, George Jacobs, was seized, and in this condition was accused by the girls of becoming an afflictor. In court, Sarah made no obvious attempt to hold out. She collapsed on the stand and confessed at once. But afterwards, she went in private to Sarah Ingersoll and distractedly sobbed out her story. Nothing in her confession, which had further incriminated poor Jacobs, had been true. She had belied herself. She had confessed only out of fear of torture and hanging. Uh, if I told no, if I told no, Miss, no, if I told Mr. No Yes at once I had set my hand on the book, he would believe me, wailed the girl. But if I told him 100 times I had not, he would not believe me. Sarah Ingersoll soothed the girl and then set her jaw and made note of the conversation at present as testimony in court. But she acted quietly and through her disposition was uh, duly filed with the rest. Neither ministers nor magistrates gave it any weight. Sarah Churchill had freely confessed. She had been forgiven and, like Mary Warren, restored to the accusing circle. Her character as witness, no whit impaired by anything said about her or said by her. The accusing circle had become a vicious circle from which no girl had any chance of breaking free until the climate of opinion should change in Massachusetts, and of that there was yet no sign. Okay, so how many people went to jail this chapter? Like, I think three. Three people went to jail this chapter, I think. Yeah. So that's the end of chapter 7. I'll read chapter 8 probably tomorrow.